All right, I think this is a go. This is somewhat impromptu, but I figured those of you who are, wishing to follow already do. But I did want to get a little bit of Illustrator under our belt. I know we've been working on it, but this way we have a little bit more, so you can see what you can customize, etc. And then hopefully this weekend I can go over one more. When you open Illustrator, you're going to see, recent files down here if you have them already. You can change the view, so it could just be more lists, or you could have it more pictorial like buttons. So it's going to depend on your preference with that. There are presets that already exist for you, or you can go ahead and create just a new document. So let's do that. As usual, I am a huge supporter of the quick keys. So if this is something you are into, I usually recommend new, save, close, quit, copy, paste, select all is the ones that we sort of want to start with. So for that, if you're on a PC, it's Control. If you're on a Mac, it's a Command, and then N for new. All right, the last one that I've worked on was actually a 6x6, which if we just want to practice, let's just make it a normal letter sheet of paper. So you can save presets. There are mobile presets. Now the saved ones, when I was at the newspapers, I had our specific add column sizes or full sheet, half sheet, etc. here, because they are file sizes that I would be using a lot. So I would have had pre-saved ones if I was there. There are mobile ones, there are web ones, print, which is where we're going to head, film and video, and if you're more art illustration, so postcards, posters, etc. But let's go to print. When in doubt, if you're just like mucking about and playing around with it, letter tabloid, one of those is fine. The A4s, A4-5s, the Bs, those are more international sizes. If you get more into illustration, you'll probably be using those sizes more. And legal is 8.5 by 14. So 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17. So let me grab a piece of paper. All right, so this is our letter sheet here. So one letter is actually 2 tabloids. So they're going to scale down nicely in proportion. So if you're setting it up just to play around, letter is going to print easier for you. Tabloid is basically those just doubled. So, if you're using Illustrator, it can get a little bogged down the more you do because it is a vectorized program. So just keep that in mind. I sometimes just have students work in letter and we scale up when it's print time. So vector is a mathematically produced design. So if it's the size of a stamp, it's going to be clear. And if it's going to be the size of a building, it's going to be clear. Whereas if you were in Photoshop, that's bitmap or raster. That is pretty much the size it's at. This is the size it's going to look good for. So if it's 8.5 by 11 like this one, it'll be clear. It'll be great, fine, perfect at that size. You can scale down, and it shouldn't give too much problems, but you can't really scale up. Because let's say we have a blue dot beside a red dot, and when we double it, the computer's like, well, what do I do with this in between space? I'll just spit out random colors there. And that's why you get that sort of bitmappy look to it. So just keep that in mind. Vector's nice for, illustrations, specifically logos. I typically say if there is a logo and someone says do it in Photoshop, go, are you sure about that? Because you do want it to be in vector, because if it's going to be on a pen and teeny tiny, it'll be clear, and it has to be on that billboard, it's going to be clear. So it gives you that flexibility of scaling. This one's preset to points. I do typically work in inches. At the newspaper, we would use picas, and then, web either pixels or points, depending on what you're building. You can have it portrait, you can have it landscape. I'll come back to artboards because I'm going to make a couple different documents. And then a bleed if you so desire. And I'm going to show that on the 3rd. So I'm going to set up this document. I'm going to do a landscape document. I'm going to do a multiple artboard document. And then I'm going to show you bleeds, because bleeds are a little bit weird. There will be later down the line. They're not so much for the introductory courses, but it's just something I like to introduce. so that you are aware of it, so that if it does come up, you're like, what? What are they talking about, this weird thing of bleed? There are advanced options. Since this is print, we want it to be CMYK. RGB is for web, and we do want it to be, you know, high DPS on that one. So those shows up there, so that's A-OK. And we have more settings should we so desire, but for the most part, you know, I'm happy with what the default is here. So let's make portrait first, all right? May it not blow up like Photoshop did. All right, so I'm going to Command or Control N, make another new one. I'm going to go to print again. Out of paranoia, let's just make sure it's 8.5 by 11. Now this one, let's say we want it to be landscape. Sweet, there's our landscape. And again, I'm going to make another one. For this, I wouldn't care what you did, if it was landscape or portrait. But let's make like 9 artboards, just because some people's work styles, if you look at people like Aaron Draplin, when he designs, he likes multiple artboards. So like one's your reference images, the next one's your type, the next one's your color. So you sort of work through the whole branding process that way, or design process, whatever it is you're working on. Multiple artboards can be really super useful. Let's say we're doing a 2-sided flyer. So you would need 2 artboards. One's the front, one's the back. Maybe that flyer is a brochure, so same thing, front and back. If it's something a little bit more intense for page layout, so like a book or a magazine layout, I do recommend just going into InDesign, which we eventually get to on that one. So keep it to, like, if it's going to be an actual design project, 2, 4, that's fine. The more artboards I have is just mostly me thinking and seeing how do I want, you know, a specific typeface for something. Then I have sort of room to scoot around. I'm going to go ahead and hit create and zoom out so that we can see each of these. Now you can go in and you could adjust accordingly. You can also make more artboards. There is an artboard window, and you can keep adding. They're going to just dump it to the side this way, and I'm going to undo those. Boom, boom. And you can also control your artboards under File, Document Setup. And this is usually where you're like, well, I want to change the size. And then Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, this is one area that gets a little bit different for each. In Photoshop, it's the image size. To change your paper size. In Illustrator, it's here under Document Setup, and you have to go into Edit Artboards, and then in InDesign, it's just Document Setup, so you don't have to go into an extra step. So this is one of those rare times that these 3 programs don't actually sync up the same. So if we were adding a bleed, we could have done it here. We could have changed, you know, our grids, overlays, etc., adjusted our type should we have desired. But let's go ahead and edit our artboards, and this is why I do like to show it, because people sort of get like, oh, what do I do here? It looks the same, but what we see is it has the artboards on here. So if I wanted to add more, there's the size. Do you want it portrait? Do you want it landscape? Okay, I want a new one. Maybe I don't want it there. Maybe I want it to keep, you know, snapping down. Don't. That way it'll keep going in a row. You can adjust accordingly. If you don't want them, you can trash them. So you can do that there. And if you need to go out and start working again, you have to hit your escape key. So it really doesn't look any different, but and Control 0 will sort of do that full size page. But what's nice with this is if you do want to keep them going in that grid instead of stacked across, then you can have that flexibility with it. So like I said, Draplin, you know, it'll be like he has his color swatches, what typefaces he likes. So if it's more of a branding project, he sort of puts everything on each one and then starts working on the pieces and the shape building. I've found you are either a multiple artboard worker or you're a single artboard worker who likes the pasteboard around it. So the artboard is this section, so it's whatever is going to print. It's actually the paper part. Whatever's around it, and I'm using that Control- will zoom out, Control+ is going to zoom in, 0 resets it to the full. So if I zoom way out, the pasteboard is this dark gray part. So if you're someone who likes to sort of doodle or scratch to the side, you can do it in that area. This light gray, nothing's going to happen there. You do have a limitation with that. So I can zoom in with the plus, so Control or Command plus, minus, and 0 takes it back to that full page. All right, so for just this beginning, and I know, this is sort of, you've already jumped in, but I always like to go over this just to make sure everyone's on the same page. We have our tools here on the left. We have our palettes on the right. And this is sort of like the extra area at the top, so there's a couple repeats. And I know I said it with Photoshop. It's kind of maddening because there's not just one way to do these things. There's like 20, 30, 90 different ways to do these. So in the beginning, to find that efficient workflow, it is a little bit confusing. So I like to spend just one section showing you what all you can do with just the tools and the palettes, and then we can build the shapes beyond that. Because Illustrator seems sort of trickier at first, but then once you have what I call an aha moment, you start to realize how much it can do and how powerful it actually is. So it's one of those, practice just makes permanent on that. So if you're not quite comfortable with it, just keep spending time with it. I was really slow to like Illustrator in my student era. I think it took me a good 4 years before I was like, oh, I see what it can do. So never put a timeline on yourself with learning these programs. You're going to be learning them for the rest of your life if you stay in the design spectrum. So every day we basically learn something new, or, oh, I didn't know it did that, or 2020 comes out and you're like, oh, another pen tool, great. So that tool I'm not familiar with yet. So it's the curvature tool. I was sort of playing around with it. You'll always have something in these programs, which I think is actually the fun part with that. So we have our menu bars at the top, this little extra bit that we're going to talk about when we're doing colors and strokes and fills, etc. But let's start with our tools on the left. So depending on how your Illustrator starts out, you might have a single line like this, or you might have a double line. This is all personal preference. So I usually have people, when they're learning these programs, each week maybe try something different. So maybe single one week, double the next, different style for your palettes, till you find which system is actually going to work best for you. So this way, if you have it single stacked like this, will give you more working screens. So if you are someone who wants to maximize the real estate of where you're working, you probably will have the preference of it being stacked like this. If you notice there's a double caret, so we have a double caret here, double caret on the top right and the other top right. So double carets means it can either expand or collapse. So let's click this on our tools. You can see we lost some of that real estate, but what it did is, this is what I lovingly call the old school Photoshop Illustrator. By default, they used to come like this, but what was nice is it paired things that were logical together. So our regular selection, our direct select. Lassos, our magic wands, pen, this new curvature tool, which does make sense. Type and line, shape and brush, and it sort of groups them the whole way down. And you can see your fill and stroke a little bit larger. So I'm just going to collapse it so you can see this is now a little bit smaller. So if you're someone who likes to double click and mix your colors, you might like the double system also, because it'll be a little bit bigger and easier for you to grab. So our fill also has a swap. So you could draw on your box, could be filled in with the black and have a white outline, or you could have it flip back. If you make a crazy color, this corner resets it to the default. We have a solid color, we have a gradient, and then we have none. So sometimes, say like with the pen tool, some people, and I'm one of them, I don't like to have a color when I'm working, so it looks like I'm just drawing. So I will draw with the pen tool with no fill. Again, personal preference, so it's going to depend on which one you like. And if you don't want it, take it back to that default. Palettes, the same thing. We have our expands and collapses. So this, again, takes away some of that real estate. So if I do my reset now, I'm just sort of smushed in a little bit more. But this is nice because you can kind of grab and not have to go, now what's that icon again? So if you find yourself forgetting what are these icons, maybe in the learning stage, just keep it out so you can see everything. Yours probably looks different than mine because I have mine set up to how I like to work. So I like my colors out. I use swatches a lot if I'm just going to do a basics. Brushes are behind there if I need them. I know I never use symbols, but they're there if we want them. A symbol is, and I think you have to use it with the spray can, essentially a rubber stamper. So they are good for fillers, and I haven't used them much more beyond that. I change my strokes quite a bit, and I keep this expanded. So yours might not show everything, and these 3 bars will actually expand the options so you can see everything. So if you feel like it's a little too smushed up, maybe make sure there's nothing hiding. Graphic styles, appearance, I don't really use. I use layers a lot, so that one's usually out to the front. But since I was talking about art boards, that one did pop out to the front, and it will remember what you did last, which is great and maddening all at the same time. Whatever properties, so if you didn't want this document to be in inches anymore, you wanted it back to points, you can change it there. You can edit your artboards there. See, there's more than one way to do it. There's usually 50. Rulers, guides, snap to options, etc. So if you want to change these, sometimes you don't want something to snap, so you can adjust it to there. So snapping just means if I draw something or if there's a guide there, I'll just pop it right up to it. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. Libraries, depending on how often you use this, certain apps will actually talk to this. So in my case, I use, and I just blanked on the name of it, Adobe Capture, I think is what it is. And I'm just going to pop it up on my phone just so you can see what I'm talking about. So Adobe Capture, when it loads, all right, there it is. I can set colors. So these colors that are on the right of my screen actually come from this app. I can build shapes, I can build patterns, I can build gradients, I can make a drawing vector through there. So it's sort of an extra little tool that I like to use specifically when it comes to Illustrator, because then I can pop through. And if I have certain, because I use this teal and this chocolatey brown all the time and this yellow, so I don't have to find it every time. Because I've taken it in Capture, it shows up in my library. And then pattern, I do a lot of projects with patterns, so I have a lot of patterns, but they all show up here. And because you're on the cloud, it will sync up through there. So I do leave my library up, but I usually pop the properties on top so it doesn't, take too much of that memory refreshing. And then when I need to use it, I just pop over there. So there's a lot. There's more. Everything that's in your palettes can be found under your window, and you can see the little check marks of what is actually up and active. If you wanted gradients, it can pop up, so you can see it's hiding over there. If there's something that you're not going to use, so let's say symbols, and you're like, I'm never going to use symbols, you can click hold on that little tab, and you can drag it around, and you can actually close it. So there's that little X, and if you're like, oops, no, I did want the symbols, it's okay, it's still there. You just have to get it from the windows. And the same thing, you can click hold, and you can see where it's highlighted in the blue, you can put it back in. Or you can peel it away again, and a single line means it's going to dump it in between the two sections. So if you don't want it, go ahead and get rid of it. Each week, what I like to say, try something different, add some more, expand, contract however you wish. You can compress both of these if you feel really comfortable with the symbols and how they're created, then you get even more screen. I have a pretty big screen when I work, so I don't really worry about that part. I am more of a visual worker, so I do usually leave mine up when I'm working, but I do leave that single. So it just depends. Again, practice, figure out which one you like. If you worry about messing up, do not worry about that. It is all under Window Workspace. So right now it was checked under Classics. Now I have fiddled with this a little bit. So if I swap it out, it might forget some of it. So you can actually tell it to make a new workspace. And I'll usually put my name for, 0214, Happy Valentine's Day. 2020. So I'll just put the dates. I'm like, that was the one I used last. And that way, if you're experimenting, you can sort of be like, oh, I like the one from February or March or whatever. And then it will show up at the top. And you can go back. So printing, you can see these are the things you would just need for printing. Workspace, let's say type. All the type tools are going to come up to the top. So let's just expand it so you can see. So you have your character, paragraph, open type, styles, appearance, artboard. So it's what Adobe thinks you would like for type, for print, for illustration, etc. But we'll go back to what I saved, and magically it goes back to how I like it set up. So it's just, when you're on your own home computer, this is nice, and then that way you can sort of experiment, but while knowing you have the one that you really like the most. So try expanding, try collapsing, and seeing if you like them expanded. Just to go over the tools, I just want to see where I'm at. Okay, I don't want to make this too long. I get really excited over Workspace and efficient workflow, so I can get a little long-winded. We have two selection tools. Now, if you hear me in these chats say grab the regular selection, what I'm talking about is this one. It's just the selection tool. We have another one under it called the direct select. So the direct select is going to take just one little point or two if you want, and you can sort of fiddle it accordingly, whereas the regular selection moves it as a whole or a unit. So if I'm making a shape and I want to move it over here, that's going to be your regular selection. If I've made a shape and this corner looks weird, that's your direct select. So you can just pick that one. We are going to talk about those later. I'm just going to hit like the ground running with the essentials. Your pen tool is everyone's favorite, she said sarcastically. The pen tool is one of those tools, once you get used to and you have that aha moment, you're going to be like, wow, why did we fight for so long? This is amazing. Anything that has a little caret in the corner has more info, so you can see there's the pen tool. You can add anchors, delete anchors, and convert is what that used to be called, convert your anchor point. So from a straight to a curve, from a curve back to straight. So when you're working with this, if you're just in the essentials workspace, you're not going to see the plus and the minus. The essentials of 2020, they give you a super pared down version of Illustrator. So you may want to start with Essentials Classic just so that you can see all of these. Oop, and it started to draw all of these extras underneath of it. So they will tear off. You can put them wherever you want, and you can X to get rid of them. So again, click and hold, hover over this gray bar, and it will tear off and close. Type tool, same thing. We have all of these under it. For now, you're probably just going to worry about type, regular, and maybe type on a path if you wanted something to arc. Lines, so let's start with lines. You know, you can draw however you want with this. If I hold down my shift key, it's going to constrain it to horizontal or, you know, perpendicular, or it's going to do a perfect 45. So if you want freedom and movability, no shift key. If you want to constrain it, hold the shift key down and it'll keep it on the straights. All right, let's just do a tear off. Okay, I'm going to hold down my space bar. And you're going to notice when I hold down my space bar, it turns into the little hand, which is also here. So it's the same way. So you could go change the tool, change back, or you could just hit your space bar. What the hand tool does, it's going to scoot you around your artboard. This is nice because sometimes when you're working, you want to sort of see different corners, especially if you're zoomed in. So you can just be like, boop, 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 like this isn't right. Let's go fix that. It's much easier to space bar and move. Okay, I'll go back out though so we can see everything. This is our arc tool. So if I don't do anything, it's going to make, essentially, if it was constrained, a quarter of a circle. So if I hold down my shift key, you know, you could build a circle in theory, or at least parts of it. How you start to draw is the direction in which it heads. So if I could draw down, right, left, and up. So it's swinging the point in that direction. And I am also a pasteboard user, so what's over in a pasteboard, remember, will not print. This is just your think sort of doodle sketch area. All right, we have a spiral, same thing. I clicked and drew to 4 or 5 o'clock. Up, down, left, right. So it's going to sort of position in whatever direction you're heading. If you do not let go, so this is called keeping it active. So I'm still clicking and holding. If I use my up arrow on the keyboard, it'll add more rotations, and it will remember that. And if I keep it active and I use my down arrow, it will actually remove those rotations. So you do have the ability to finesse these a little bit. Polar grid, or what do they call these now? These used to just be the grid. Rectangular grid tool, you guessed it. It makes rectangular grids. Hold down that shift key, and you're going to be able to constrain that proportion to a square. If we keep it active, up arrow adds rows, down arrow is going to take them away, and it gets a little bit different here. Right arrow adds columns, left arrow is going to take them away. So if I wanted a 4 square design, I'm going to be able to get that just by negating those extra cells, and it does remember it. So if you want to sort of put it back to where it was, you'd be able to do that. And the polar grid does the same. Sort of looks like a weird bullseye or sliced pizza. Hold down the shift key, it'll keep it in a circle. If I keep it live, you guessed it, up arrow adds, down arrow subtracts, right arrow adds our pizza slices, left is going to take away. So if I wanted to pretend I was target, I can make a sort of bullseye, and if I wanted a pizza, I would add those slices and then just down arrow, and it's going to remember that also. So just keep that in mind. That one you can have some fun with. I will say you'll probably use the line segment tool the most out of these. These are very situational, but if I do close this, this is important for whenever you're just getting started. And if you're like, oh, I need to make a line, and you're like, line, 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 it will remember what you used last, and if you forget that the line is under all of this, it's going to be tricky to find again. So in the early stages, I usually say, just reset it back to that line when you're done so you know you can find that again. All right, I'm just going to keep it to the side here. Okay, our shape building tools, I'm going to tear those off. Rectangle, rectangle, hold down the shift key, we got that square. Rounded, I'm going to keep these side by side so you can sort of see a similarity. So like we were saying, there's multiple ways to do all of these. These little circles in the corner are going to give you more flexibility with your rounded corners, but they also, let me switch back to this, will adjust a normal rectangle also. So you can have a rounded rectangle either with the actual tool or with the rectangle, and you just adjust with those little circles accordingly. So it's like that little dot thing there. So you have two options of making it that way. Circle, so it's an oval or an ellipse. So an ellipse is a circle in perspective. If you take a drawing class, chances are you're going to have a whole unit just on ellipses. If you hold down your shift key, you guessed it, it's going to make that circle. Polygon, if I hold down my shift key, it's going to keep the top two lines in parallel with your artboard. I'm just going to move that over so we can see it. I'm going to do another one, but I'm going to keep it active. If I do my up arrow, it's going to add more size. So you're going to get this, however, I mean, you could keep going. Boop, boop, boop. As many as you want. Or if I take the down arrow, whoops, there we go. It'll take it, the lowest is 3. So if you're like, how do I do a triangle? This is one option. So you can make a triangle. It will remember it. Boom, boom. If you want to get it back to where it was. Star. Pretty self-explanatory. Hold the shift key. It's going to constrain it just like our polygon. The top and bottom is alignment with our artboard. If I keep it active, up arrow turns it into a burst. You're going to see these a lot. If you get into advertisement design, sale, 1 day only, BOGO, 50% off. And it's just that one, open Sunday, 1 to 4. If there's a picture there, it's usually like the client thinks that little burst is going to like catch someone's eye, which it might, and it will remember it. We should talk about that. If you already have a shape and you just click, you can actually add a little bit more to it. So maybe if it has to be a perfect 2 by 2 by 20 points, you know, you're able to do that with this. Let's do an undo though. So down arrow makes a star also. Whoop. So, or star, a triangle. So you can make a triangle 2 different ways. And the same thing, you can tell it to do a little bit more. Same thing with, say, you know, if we're doing a rectangle, it has to be a perfect 2-inch by 2-inch cube. There it is. You know it's going to be the right size. This would be the same thing if you're doing a really specific design where, you know, if you have a gridding and you know it has to be by multiples of 2, you can say, all right, we got 2 by 2 on that. All right, the next one I'm going to talk about in a second after I add some colors, because it has a sort of strange little experience with transparency. So he comes with a little bit of a caveat. We'll come back to him. If we wanted to change the colors, you guessed it, there's like 9 million, just kidding, different ways to do this. You can change it through your color, and I'm just clicking using my regular select. You can change it through your color guide. You can change it to your swatches. You can change it up here where there says none, and that gives you a drop down of your swatches also. Or you can double click, change it over in the bottom left, and this works as like a Roy G. Biv slide. So it's, let's go with pink because pink usually looks decent on a screen. It'll give you the tints. So this, consider the upper right corner is like the 100% of the color, and then it goes through all the tints, and then it goes through all the shades. So you get a little bit of everything and all the subtle nuances in between. You can adjust it even here, like if you get into web design, you can put the hex codes. So in web design, we have the hex codes that you actually would, you know, code in. You can, you know, we build mock-ups here in Illustrator for webs all the time, so you can put your code there also, and it works great. All right, so we can get it to be magenta that way. You can go into your libraries, and you can add it that way. One of these is going to make the most sense for you, so just experiment with each of them and see where you innately navigate towards. Put as many colors in as you want. The sky's the limit. But let's talk about the solar flare tool. So the solar flare eats up a lot of your memory. So I'll start with that. It looks so cool. I would say up to like 3 to 5 is a good number. So if you're doing a mechanical rendering or an illustration and you need that little, and I know one of my students did this once, we had a tool project where you created an object and she did a camera. But you know how the illustration has that little like lens flare bounce? This is essentially a lens flare. And I'm just going to toss one over to the side so you can see the mechanics, and then I'll do it over the color. One time, the first semester ever teaching, I turned my back on this tool, and people had made like hundreds of these because they're so cool, and our entire lab crashed, and it blew up the systems network. So I'm always kind of nervous about the solar flare tool after that one. So that's why I'm like, 3 to 5 is good. 100, you're probably going to crash your system because it's beautiful, but it takes up so much memory. So this tool is a 2-click. First click gives the intensity of the bounce. The second is the reflection. So I'll deselect so you can see it. So it's giving that little bit of a pop, but it's also, you can control, and I'll undo both of these so you can see it. So if it's like a bounce and then it bounces over here, it will give you the ability to control how the reflection is going to look. So what's interesting with this is when you go, let's say with hers, like the camera, whatever you've drawn under it will actually be transparent, so you're going to get these special effects with it. So it will look like you can see on the magenta and the teal one, it's going to look like the light's bending on it. So it is a super fun and useful tool, especially with illustrating like the more mechanical side of things. But just know, like, if you do a lot of them, your file is probably going to crash and not open up again. So just be careful with that one. Same thing with line. Just go ahead and put it back to the rectangle so that you can find it. Probably our last one du jour will be the brush tool, and then we'll go into shape building in another day. But the paintbrush, you guessed it, is just going to paint. If you have a tablet, it will do the pressure, but if you don't have a tablet, it's just going to keep it uniform. Your color, so fill is stroke. In Photoshop, we're used to foreground, background. In Illustrator and InDesign, it's fill and stroke. So the fill is the main color inside, and the stroke is the outline. So if you wanted these to be a different color and nothing's happening, you have to click one time on the stroke and pull it up. I'm going to pick on my paper again. Do I have Post-it notes? That would be easier. I do. 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to steal my Post-it notes because it's the same size. So let's see. I think it's going to be backwards for you. So let's do one of these. All right, I think I have it going in the right direction. Fill, stroke. So whatever's in front is what's going to change. And I know this is stupid to do it this way, but the number one of why isn't my color working, it's usually this. So it has to be activated. So if I want my stroke, boop, I have to click on it and move it to the front. That way, that's the one that's changing. If I'm trying to change the inside and nothing's happening, you're like, why isn't it pink? It's blue. You know, get it to the front. That way you're changing the right one. So it's, I know it's stupid to have to do it that way, but that is the one thing I've seen time and time again in the early stages. So just be aware of that one. So you guessed it. You can double click to change that color. Go to the color. You can go to your swatches. You can go up top where it's the fill and the stroke up there. Any system works. So now we have a much brighter line. And let's change it here. Let's make it more of a greenish. And I'm just going to use one of each. And you can make it a little bit bigger under the stroke, however you want. And let's change the last one to more of a blue. All right. And I've purposely done multiple colors because there's another tool hiding under our brush, and it's the blob brush. Let's pull him out. So these two depend totally on your work style. If you're someone who wants finite control and being like, I need this over here, and oh, no, I'm wrong. It's right there, and this would look better here. If you want to move each of these individually, you probably want the regular brush. The blob brush, wherever you draw, is now one giant shape. So it actually converts it to the shape. And you can see right here, the line's gone. If I want to change the color, I have to now change it through the actual fill. This is kind of nice because then you're like, okay, this moves as one unit, you know. What if, you know, I want it to be different colors? You can see it just keeps blobbing together. This is good if you want a repeat pattern. So you can duplicate any object by holding down on a Mac, your Option key, and it's an Alt key on a PC. So if I wanted a quick texture, the blob brush, it's nice and uniform, but you can have a little bit more organization with it. Whereas if it was this and I wanted to duplicate it, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 7-ish lines. And if I didn't quite get it right, you'd have to keep backtracking. So again, it depends on your work style. Do you want it to be uniform or do you want individual control? So I always like to bring both of those up so that you know about them and can start experimenting with these. You could also change their opacity up here. So it doesn't even have to be 100%. You can, actually, let's just take all of them down so we can see 70%. What's nice with this is then you get all the overlays as well, so it feels more painterly. I think that's one of the weird things when transitioning from Photoshop to Illustrator is Photoshop was all nice and sort of soft, and Illustrator is really hard-edged and crisp, so the two are really at a dichotomy as far as the spectrum of edges goes. So maybe try the opacity, dialing it down also. And you can do this to the shapes also. The opacity was there also. So you can see, you know, the overlaps of color. So you can get a little bit more layering look with it. It's not going to have a painterly feel to it, but it will help soften it up just that little bit, but remember, it will remember it. So if it doesn't look right the next time, make sure it's set back up to that 100% opacity.